Silence is your best answer to someone who doesn't value your words. A Buddhist wisdom. A Zen master once lost his reputation overnight. The village turned against him. People who had respected him for years suddenly looked at him with contempt and certainty. And when they came to his door, demanding an explanation, he answered with only 3 words. Most people hear that story and think it is about patience. It isn't. It is about a need that silently controls almost every argument, every misunderstanding, and every painful conversation in your life. A need so common that most people never even notice it. And every time you keep explaining yourself to someone who isn't listening, that need is what is actually speaking. Most people think that staying silent means giving up. That if you stop defending yourself, stop clarifying, stop trying to make the other person understand, you are admitting defeat. You are letting a lie stand. You are allowing yourself to be diminished. So they keep talking. They find better words, calmer words, more careful words. They try again from a different angle, with more patience, with more evidence, with the quiet desperation of someone who believes that the right sentence will finally unlock something in the person across from them. It almost never does. Before we go further, think of someone you have kept trying to reach. Someone who has not heard you or will not. Someone you have explained yourself to more than once. Hold that person in mind. What you are about to hear may change what you think that situation is actually about. Hakuin was a Zen master living in a village in Japan, known for his practice and his integrity. One day, a young woman in the village became pregnant. Frightened, she named Hakuin as the father. The accusation spread immediately. People who had respected him came to his door with contempt and certainty. The village turned. Hakuin listened to everything they said. Then he spoke 3 words, "Is that so?" Not a denial. Not an explanation. Not an appeal to his reputation or his years of practice. Nothing more. When the child was born, they brought the baby to him. He accepted it. Through the winter, he cared for the child quietly, while the village continued to regard him with suspicion, while his reputation lay in ruins, while no one came to ask whether the story was true. Months later, the young woman confessed. The real father was someone else entirely. The family came back ashamed. Hakuin listened. Then he returned the child and said, "Is that so?" The same 3 words. Not "I told you." Not "Now do you see?" Just "Is that so?" Most people hear this story and admire Hakuin. Then something uncomfortable happens. Because admiration quickly becomes exposure. You realize the story is measuring you. And somewhere inside, a voice says, "I wouldn't have done that. I would have defended myself. I would have explained. I would have needed them to know the truth." And suddenly, the story is no longer about Hakuin. It is about the thing he was free from. And the thing most of us still serve. And here's the part that makes people uncomfortable. Most of us hear Hakuin's story and assume the lesson is about patience, or emotional control, or spiritual discipline. It isn't. The real question is not, how did Hakuin stay calm? The real question is, what was he not depending on that the rest of us depend on every day? Imagine someone spreads a false story about you at work. A friend misunderstands something you said. A family member repeats a version of events that leaves out half the truth. How long could you remain silent? Because what hurts most in those moments is not the accusation. It is the feeling of being seen incorrectly. We tell ourselves we are defending the truth, but often we are defending something much more fragile, an image, an identity, a version of ourselves that we need other people to confirm. Hakuin had arrived somewhere different, not because he had suppressed those needs through years of discipline, but because he had looked at them clearly enough, long enough, to see that they were movements in the mind. Real felt present, but not the same as truth, not something that required the outside world to resolve. He did not need the village to correct its view of him in order to remain himself. That is not composure. That is freedom. And it raises a question that is harder to answer about yourself than about a Zen master in a story. What are you still needing the other person to give you? In the ordinary, daily moments. The conversation where you explained yourself again. The message you sent to clarify. The silence afterward, waiting to see if they would respond differently this time. What is it you are actually waiting for? That question will matter in a few minutes. Because what follows is not about monks or ancient teachers. It is about someone much closer. Someone you have been trying to reach for a very long time. Leave the village behind for a moment. Leave the accusation. Leave Hakuin standing there with his 3 words. And come somewhere much closer. Because false accusations are rare. Most of us will never experience what Hakuin experienced. But almost all of us will experience something else. The slow realization that another person, someone we love, someone we chose, someone we have lived beside for years, may never see the world the way we do. And who, somewhere along the way, stopped seeing certain things the same way. It might be money. It might be ambition. It might be something quieter, a difference in how much weight to give to the inner life, whether stillness is wisdom or avoidance, whether acceptance is peace or surrender. One of them speaks, offers a perspective carefully, with genuine intention. The other hears judgment. The conversation sharpens. One person is called naive, weak, out of touch with how the world actually works. The other tries again, more gently, more precisely. Tries to close the distance between what was said and what was heard. Nothing reaches. And so they go quiet. Not in defeat, but in the clear recognition that the conditions for understanding are not here right now. That continuing to speak will not open anything. It will only push further closed what is already closing. A tree does not flower because you explain to it why flowering would be beneficial. It flowers when the season is right. The conditions arrive. Until then, no amount of explanation can force it. People are often the same. Maybe you have already lived this. A grown son who left the career his father had chosen for him, not in rebellion, but in the quiet recognition that the life being handed to him was not his life. He explained it once, then again, carefully, without blame. The father listened, nodded even, and then brought it up again the following year, as if the conversation had never happened. Not because he hadn't understood, but because understanding something and accepting it are not the same thing. And when you try to force what is not yet ready, when you keep explaining, keep pushing, keep believing that the right words at the right volume will finally move something, you are not serving the other person. You are serving your own need to have done something. Now here is the part that is harder to sit with than anything else in this video. For years, you may have believed the problem was communication. That if only they understood, everything would be different. But there is a possibility most people never allow themselves to consider. What if they understood you perfectly? What if they heard every word? What if nothing was lost in translation? And they still chose differently? Because then the problem was never communication. And that is much harder to accept. Not because they were broken. Not because they were incapable of understanding. But because they were living their own life with their own conditions, their own season, their own questions that your answers were never going to resolve. Maybe the painful part was never that they didn't understand. Maybe the painful part was that they understood and still became someone other than who you needed them to be. And if that is true, then silence begins to look very different. But even when you stop speaking, the conversation is often not over. It simply moves somewhere else. And this is where most people make the final mistake. They chose the silence. They held the line. They did not speak when speaking would have caused more harm. And then they expect the silence to feel like peace. It doesn't, not yet. The conversation is over. But it isn't over inside you. Hours later, you are still talking to them. Only now they are gone. And the argument continues in your head. This is the strange thing about silence. It doesn't remove the conflict. It reveals where the conflict was living all along. There is a name for this movement in the mind. The quiet resistance to what has already happened. The push against what is. You chose the silence. And the silence did not make that resistance disappear. It simply stopped it from speaking. And now it has nowhere to go except inward, where it can finally be seen. Not managed, not suppressed, not talked down by a quieter inner voice telling you that you should not feel this way. Just seen. The tightness in the chest, the replaying mind, the wanting to be known. Can you feel the shape of each of those without climbing inside them? The observation is simply observation. Clear, direct, without agenda. And what happens, not because you wanted it to, but because that is the nature of what is seen clearly, is that the resistance finds nothing solid to grip. No self to protect. No image to defend. And without anything to hold on to. It moves through. The person you could not change was never yours to change. The misunderstanding you could not correct was never yours to carry. Hakuin did not need the village to believe him in order to remain himself. He had arrived at an understanding that silence, when it comes from clarity rather than defeat, always points toward. That the people in your life may hear every word you say. They may understand you more completely than you realize. And still, walk a different road. Not because something failed. Not because the words were wrong or the timing was off, or you didn't explain it clearly enough. But because they are living their own life, with their own season, their own conditions that were never yours to control. The need to be seen correctly never disappears because someone finally sees you correctly. It disappears when you no longer require that vision to know who you are. Peace does not arrive when they finally understand. Peace arrives when you stop needing their understanding in order to be whole. That is the silence the teaching points toward. Not the silence of someone who gave up. The silence of someone who stopped negotiating with what was already true. Think of that person you held in mind at the beginning. The one you have been trying to reach. Is there something you have finally said enough?